Imagine a battle where one side, convinced of their own tactical brilliance and historical advantage, steamed directly into a meticulously laid trap, a trap that would not only annihilate their force, but fundamentally alter the course of naval warfare forever. It wasn't just a defeat, it was an execution, a brutal demonstration of a new era. By late October 1944, the Pacific War had reached a fever pitch, a crucible of desperate gambles and technological leaps. Admiral Shoji Nishimura, commanding Japan's southern force, felt the heavy thrum of his battleships, Yamashiro and Fuso, cutting through the dark waters, leading his column towards the narrow confines of Surigao Strait. His mission, to break through to Leyte Gulf and attack the American invasion fleet, a move so audacious it bordered on suicidal. In the next 18 minutes, you'll see exactly how this unfolded and why it still matters to anyone who understands the shifting sands of strategy. The stakes couldn't have been higher. General MacArthur's return to the Philippines, specifically Leyte, signaled a decisive turning point in the war, threatening to sever Japan's vital oil supply lines from Southeast Asia. Tokyo's response was Operation Shogo 1, a desperate, all-or-nothing gambit designed to crush the American invasion. It was a complex, multi-pronged attack, but Nishimura's southern force carried a unique burden. They were to be the hammer, driving directly into Leyte Gulf through Surigao Strait, drawing American attention while other, more powerful Japanese forces attempted to flank the unsuspecting U.S. fleet. Nishimura's approach was a direct, head-on assault, relying on the venerable power of his battleships and the honed night-fighting doctrine that had long been a Japanese strength. For decades, the Imperial Japanese Navy had trained extensively for night engagements, emphasizing optical sighting and the devastating reach of their long-lance torpedoes. They believed the darkness was their ally, a cloak under which their skill would prevail. But the Americans, under Vice Admiral Jesse B. Oldendorf, were not playing by the old rules. Oldendorf commanded the Bombardment and Fire Support Group for the Leyte invasion, a formidable collection of 6 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 28 destroyers. Crucially, many of Oldendorf's battleships were survivors of Pearl Harbor, refitted and modernized, now bristling with new technology. Their mission was clear: defend Leyte Gulf at all costs. As Nishimura's force steamed closer on October 24, 1944, American scout planes had already spotted them, providing precious hours for Oldendorf to prepare. He chose Surigao Strait, a narrow, treacherous waterway, as his battleground. It was a natural choke point, perfectly suited for a trap. Oldendorf didn't just line up his ships, he orchestrated a multi-layered ambush, a masterpiece of naval engineering, designed for total annihilation. He placed his destroyers and PT boats at the entrance, a gauntlet of fast-moving torpedo platforms, followed by his cruisers, and finally, his battleships, positioned to execute the classic, devastating maneuver known as crossing the T. Nishimura, however, pressed on. Despite intelligence suggesting a significant American presence, and even after one of his own ships, the destroyer Shigure, reported contact with American torpedo boats, he maintained course and speed. Was it unwavering belief in his doctrine, a fatal flaw in intelligence, or the impossible pressure of an all-or-nothing mission? What would have been your decision at this point? Let me know in the comments what you would do. The Japanese admiral, perhaps underestimating the technological leap his enemy had made, clung to the notion that his battle line, with its powerful guns and skilled crews, could punch through. He was convinced that his advance, though costly, would achieve its objective. He saw only the path ahead, not the invisible, deadly net being woven around him. His ships continued their relentless push, unaware that the very darkness they embraced would soon betray them. Vice Admiral Oldendorf, however, had spent days meticulously crafting his response. He knew the geography of Surigao Strait was a weapon in itself, a natural bottleneck that could transform a naval engagement into a slaughterhouse. His strategy wasn't just about firepower, it was about engineering the battlefield. At the northern end of the strait, Oldendorf positioned his 6 battleships, the very ships that symbolized American naval resilience, in a single formidable line. These giants, including the West Virginia, Maryland, and California, all resurrected from Pearl Harbor, were perfectly positioned to unleash devastating broadsides, waiting to cross the T against Nishimura's approaching column. But before the battleships could deliver their crushing blow, Nishimura's force would have to run a gauntlet. The first layer of Oldendorf's trap was a swarm of PT boats. More than 30 of these small, nimble craft, commanded by officers like Lieutenant Commander John H. Walker, fanned out across the strait on the night of October 24th. Their mission was not to sink battleships, but to harass, disorient, and critically report. Their radar, though rudimentary by later standards, allowed them to detect targets far beyond the limited range of Japanese optical observation. As Nishimura's column, led by the battleship Yamashiro, pressed deeper into the strait around 1 a.m. on October 25th, the PT boats made their first contacts. Torpedoes splashed into the water, mostly missing their targets. But each near miss was a jolt, a confirmation that the Americans were there, waiting in the darkness. Nishimura, perhaps underestimating these small craft, dismissed them as mere nuisances, maintaining his course and speed, his belief in a decisive breakthrough unwavering. But the PT boats were only the vanguard. Behind them, Oldendorf had arrayed 3 groups of destroyers, each loaded with torpedoes and equipped with advanced surface search radar. These destroyers, nearly 30 of them, were poised to strike from both flanks, an unprecedented concentration of torpedo power. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Destroyer Squadron 24, spearheaded by the USS Remy, McDermott, and Monson, launched the first coordinated torpedo attacks. The Japanese fire erupted, and the mighty warship, a symbol of Japanese naval power, began to list heavily. Within minutes, the Fuso split in 2, her stern and bisections drifting apart, burning fiercely. She was out of the fight, her 14-inch guns silenced forever. A cruiser, the Mogami, and the destroyer Yamagumo also suffered severe damage. Yet even as the wreckage of the Fuso illuminated the strait with its funeral pyre, Nishimura continued his advance. He pushed on with the Yamashiro, the heavy cruiser Mogami, and the destroyer Shigure, believing that despite these grievous losses, he could still punch through. He was convinced that the worst was over, that the gauntlet had been run, and that his remaining force could still achieve its objective. But he was dead wrong. The real trap, the one designed to deliver a final crushing blow, was still ahead, silent and deadly, waiting for him to steam directly into its maw. Admiral Nishimura, battered but unbowed, continued his relentless push. He navigated the Yamashiro, followed by the crippled heavy cruiser Mogami and the lone destroyer Shigure, deeper into the strait. He was convinced that the worst of the American ambush, the torpedo attacks from the nimble destroyers, had passed. His remaining force, though diminished, still represented a formidable punch, and he held firm to the belief that sheer resolve and the power of his battleship could break through. But his conviction was a veil, blinding him to the true nature of the trap. He was steaming directly into the sights of Vice Admiral Oldendorf's main battle line, a line that had been waiting, silent and unseen, for hours. Oldendorf's 6 battleships, resurrected from the depths of Pearl Harbor, were arrayed across the northern mouth of Surigao Strait. The West Virginia, Maryland, California, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and Mississippi formed a perfectly positioned wall of steel, their formidable 14-inch and 16-inch guns loaded and ready. This wasn't a chaotic brawl. It was a meticulously planned execution. the American battleships had an advantage the Japanese could only dream of: advanced SG surface search radar. While Nishimura's lookouts strained their eyes against the inky blackness, the radar screens aboard Oldendorf's flagships painted a clear, precise picture of the approaching Japanese column. They saw every ripple, every ship, long before the Japanese could even detect the American presence. This technological disparity, a quiet revolution, rendered Japan's vaunted night fighting doctrine tragically obsolete. The West Virginia, leading the American line, made first radar contact with Nishimura's force at 3 a.m. on October 25, 1944, at a range of 42,000 yards, almost 24 miles. The data flowed instantly, feeding into fire control computers that calculated precise firing solutions in real time. Nishimura's ships, on the other hand, were still relying on optical rangefinders and human eyes, utterly blind to the invisible net closing around them. The irony was devastating. The very darkness the Japanese had trained for, the cover they believed favored their superior torpedoes and skilled gunners, was now their undoing, a shroud that amplified their enemy's unseen technological might. This wasn't merely a battle. It was a demonstration of a new era of naval warfare. At 3:53 a.m., the order was given. The West Virginia unleashed the first salvo of its 16-inch guns, followed swiftly by the California and Tennessee. A moment later, the sky above Surigao Strait erupted in a thunderous symphony of fire as all 6 American battleships opened up. The flashes from their monstrous guns momentarily illuminated the strait, painting a stark, terrifying picture of the overwhelming power being unleashed. Nishimura's column, now directly crossing the T of the American battle line, was caught in an impossible position. Their ships were silhouetted against the gun flashes, unable to effectively bring their own main armament to bear against an enemy they could not see, an enemy that rained down shells with terrifying accuracy. The Japanese battleships, designed for direct line-of-battle engagement, were reduced to target practice. The first shells slammed into the Yamashiro, tearing through her superstructure, detonating in her magazines, and rupturing her hull. Fires immediately raged, and the proud battleship, Nishimura's flagship, began to slow, then list. The sheer volume of fire was unlike anything seen before. Hundreds of heavy shells, each weighing over a ton, pounded the Yamashiro and the Mogami. The Mogami, already damaged, took further devastating hits, her bridge obliterated, her engines crippled. The Shigure, the last destroyer, desperately tried to turn, but the chaos was total, the devastation absolute. This wasn't a fair fight. It was an annihilation, a brutal one-sided slaughter orchestrated by unseen eyes. The Japanese advance, once so confident, was now dissolving into a maelstrom of steel and fire. Hold on to this detail for a second, because it redefines everything that comes next. The detail that redefined everything was the crushing finality of that moment. For Nishimura's force, there was no escape. The Yamashiro, riddled with shells, continued to burn furiously, her once proud silhouette now a twisted inferno. At approximately 4:19 a.m., she capsized and sank, carrying Admiral Nishimura and nearly all of her crew to the depths. The Mogami, though not immediately sunk by the battleship's barrage, was a wreck, limping away, only to be scuttled later that day. Of Nishimura's entire southern force, only the destroyer Shigure survived, a solitary, damaged ghost fleeing the scene of utter devastation. The American trap, sprung with precision and technological superiority, had achieved its terrifying objective: annihilation. This wasn't merely a victory. It was a brutal, conclusive demonstration that the era of direct line-of-battle clashes, where armored giants exchanged broadsides in daylight or by the faint glow of searchlights, was irrevocably over. Surigao Strait etched itself into history as the last battleship on battleship engagement, a final, definitive period mark on a chapter of naval warfare that had begun centuries earlier. The American naval trap, orchestrated by Oldendorf, validated the transformative power of radar and effectively rendered obsolete the very idea of a fleet's night-fighting superiority based solely on optical sighting and torpedo range. The Japanese doctrine, honed over decades, was shattered in a single night by an enemy they couldn't see. An enemy whose technology turned their perceived advantage, the darkness, into their greatest vulnerability. The systemic consequences were profound, far beyond the immediate destruction. The sheer scale of the annihilation, with Yamashiro and Fuso sunk and the Mogami crippled, sent shockwaves through Japanese command. Morale, already stretched thin by the desperate gamble of Shogo 1, further eroded. It exposed the fatal flaw in their intelligence, or perhaps the impossible pressure to succeed that blinded Admiral Nishimura. He pressed forward not out of a simple miscalculation, but because the strategic imperative, the all-or-nothing mission to break through to Leyte Gulf, overwhelmed any tactical caution. His unwavering belief in a doctrine that was already outdated, combined with his inability to accurately assess the enemy's true capabilities, sealed his fate and the fate of his fleet. This was a crucible where technological innovation met desperate courage, and innovation won. The story of Surigao Strait reveals how seemingly minor technological advantages, coupled with brilliant tactical deployment, could utterly redefine the battlefield. It teaches us that adaptability is not a luxury, but a necessity in the face of evolving threats. The U.S. Navy leveraged every advantage: radar, concentration of force, and a keen understanding of geography to spring a trap that annihilated a confident Japanese advance. This wasn't just about bigger guns. It was about seeing in the dark, about calculating with machines, and about anticipating a future that the enemy refused to acknowledge. So what does this pivotal moment, this last grand duel of battleships, still teach us today? It underscores the brutal realities of warfare in the 20th century and beyond, that clinging to outdated doctrines, no matter how deeply ingrained or historically successful, can lead to catastrophic failure when confronted with disruptive technology. Surigao Strait reminds us that the battlefield is constantly shifting, demanding constant innovation and a willingness to abandon what worked yesterday for what will win tomorrow. It's a powerful testament to the enduring lesson that true strength lies not just in brute force, but in foresight, adaptation, and the relentless pursuit of an unseen edge. If this deep dive into naval history and strategic shifts made sense to you, subscribe now to not miss the next chapter of how seemingly small advantages can turn the tide. Leave a like to let me know that it's worth continuing down this path, and tell me in the comments which part of this story truly turned the key for you. I'll be looking for those ideas in the next video. And if I were to show you how a similar blend of technology and daring strategy played out in the skies over the Pacific, would you be ready for that story?